This is the story of a man who challenged the greatest empire of his time at the peak of its power. In the 1st century BC, the Roman Republic was a colossal machine of war and enslavement whose legions seemed invincible. For every free Roman citizen, there were several slaves whose labor created the empire's wealth. The system seemed eternal and unshakable until someone appeared in its arenas who refused to submit. His name was Spartacus. The story of Spartacus begins long before his fame, in his homeland of Thrace, a mountainous region in the Balkans. According to one of the most likely versions, he was a free Thracian warrior, perhaps even serving in Rome's own auxiliary troops, before being captured by the Romans. Thus, Spartacus became a gladiator, yet he never accepted his fate. In 73 BC, the plot matured, and although some of the conspirators were betrayed, the core of the group decided to act. About 70 gladiators, led by Spartacus and his comrades Crixus and Aenomus, made a daring escape. They had no real weapons, so they used whatever they could find in the kitchen block: spits, cleavers, and choppers. Breaking through the guards, they burst onto the streets of Capua, terrifying citizens who were used to seeing gladiators only in the arena. Along the way, luck smiled upon them. They captured a wagon loaded with genuine gladiatorial weapons and armor intended for another school. Now armed, Spartacus's detachment immediately left the city, knowing that Rome would not forgive such a humiliation and would soon send a pursuit. They headed for Mount Vesuvius, which in those days was considered a dormant, heavily forested hill, an ideal place for concealment. The first serious encounter with local detachments showed Rome that this was not just a band of fugitives, but an organized force capable of fighting back. Spartacus was elected leader not only for his strength, but for his tactical thinking, which would soon become the empire's primary problem. The Roman Senate initially treated the news of the gladiator escape as a bothersome but minor incident. They sent Praetor Claudius Glaber with a 3,000-strong force, consisting not of experienced legionnaires, but of hastily recruited militia. Glaber acted with overconfidence and followed a predictable pattern. He blocked the only known narrow path leading to the summit of Vesuvius. The Romans set up camp at the foot of the mountain, deciding to starve the rebels out, believing that hunger and thirst would force the slaves to surrender in a few days. But Glaber failed to consider one thing. He was not fighting mere slaves, but Spartacus, whose tactical mind was far ahead of Roman textbooks. Observing the steep, almost vertical slopes of the mountain, Spartacus ordered his men to weave long, sturdy ladders from the flexible vines of wild grapes. In the deep darkness, maintaining absolute silence, the gladiators descended the cliffs one by one, right behind the backs of the carelessly sleeping Romans. The attack was lightning fast and caught Glaber's army off guard. Panic gripped the camp, and the Romans fled, abandoning their weapons and supplies. This brilliant victory had immense psychological significance. News of the victory at Vesuvius spread across southern Italy like lightning, reaching the most remote villas and farms. Spartacus's army began to grow rapidly. He was joined not only by runaway gladiators, but also by thousands of rural slaves, shepherds, and local poor. Spartacus faced an incredibly difficult task, turning this diverse, undisciplined stream of people into a combat-capable army. He introduced strict discipline and organized constant military training, where experienced gladiators served as instructors for recruits. The army was divided into legions based on the Roman model, which allowed for the effective management of vast masses of people. Spartacus understood that to defeat Rome, he needed more than just fighters. He needed a well-coordinated machine capable of maneuvering and executing complex tactical orders. Under his command gathered people of various nationalities: Thracians, Gauls, Germans, and Greeks. Spartacus managed to hold them together, united by a single goal: freedom. This army became a true nation on the move, establishing its own forges for weapon production and supply services. Soon, over 70,000 people stood under Spartacus's banners, and Rome finally realized it was facing not a riot, but a full-scale war. In 72 BC, Rome sent both consuls against Spartacus, a sign of extreme state peril that marked the beginning of total war. Yet Spartacus continued to demonstrate his genius. He maneuvered between Roman armies, defeating them one by one in a series of brilliant battles in the Apennines. However, despite military successes, serious and fatal contradictions began to grow within the rebel army itself. Spartacus, possessing strategic vision, sought to lead the people out of Italy across the Alps so they could return to their homelands and find true, eternal freedom. But his comrade, Crixus, who led the Gallic and German factions, insisted on staying in Italy to plunder wealthy Roman cities and take revenge on the empire on its own soil. This split became a tragedy. Crixus separated with a portion of the troops, about 30,000 men, and was soon defeated by consul Gellius Publicola at Mount Garganus. Despite the loss of Crixus, Spartacus's army continued its victorious march north, defeating Roman generals who tried to block their path to the Alps. The goal seemed close, the mountains were already visible on the horizon, and the path to freedom outside Italy was practically open. But here, Spartacus makes one of the most mysterious and fateful decisions in history, which historians still debate today. He turns the army back south. There are many theories explaining this turn. Perhaps his people, intoxicated by victories and rich loot, refused to leave Italy, fearing the crossing of the Alps. Other historians believe Spartacus believed in the possibility of completely crushing Rome or wanted to join forces with the rebels in Sicily. Whatever the reason, this maneuver was a strategic error that robbed the rebels of their chance for salvation and gave Rome precious time. Returning south, Spartacus found himself trapped on the Apennine Peninsula while the empire prepared its final and most terrible response. Rome, deathly afraid of Spartacus's return, granted extraordinary powers to Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in the empire who hungered for military glory. Crassus, realizing that conventional methods were not working, took command of 8 legions and began by imposing ironclad, brutal discipline. Crassus acted methodically and ruthlessly. He drove Spartacus's army to the very south of Italy, to the Bruttium Peninsula, modern Calabria. There, Crassus ordered the construction of a massive fortification, a giant ditch and a wall stretching 30 miles from sea to sea. This engineering marvel completely cut Spartacus off from resources and pinned him against the sea, turning the peninsula into a giant trap. At the same time, Spartacus tried to negotiate with Cilician pirates to transport his people to Sicily to ignite a rebellion there. The pirates took the gold but betrayed Spartacus, leaving his army alone against Crassus's approaching legions.
Spartacus's army was in a desperate position. Winter, lack of food, the pirates' betrayal, and Crassus's wall before them. It seemed the end was near, and starvation would strike before the Romans even began their assault. But Spartacus proved once again that his genius shone brightest in the darkest moments. On one of the stormiest and snowiest nights, when Roman sentries lowered their guard due to the weather, the rebels made their break. Spartacus ordered his men to fill part of the ditch with the bodies of fallen horses and fascines made of branches. Under the cover of the blizzard and darkness, Spartacus's army made a daring and incredible crossing over the ditch and the wall, breaking Crassus's blockade. Although they lost a significant portion of their men in the chaos, the core of the army broke out into the open, once again striking terror into Italy. Crassus was in a state of rage and panic. He realized the war was dragging on, and his political rival, Pompey the Great, was already returning from Spain and could steal the glory of defeating Spartacus. Crassus began pursuing Spartacus with redoubled energy, striving to end the war before Pompey's arrival. Luck began to turn away from the rebels. Another split occurred, and a detachment under the command of Gannicus and Castus was cut off by Crassus and completely destroyed. Spartacus understood that time was working against him. His forces were melting away, while Rome was drawing new legions from all corners of the empire. In 71 BC, in southern Italy, on the banks of the Silurus River, Spartacus decided to fight his final, decisive battle. The battle was incredibly chaotic. Both sides fought with fanaticism, knowing there would be no mercy for anyone. Spartacus personally led a desperate charge, trying to fight through the thick of the enemy directly to Crassus to kill him and decide the outcome of the war in a single duel. In this final surge, Spartacus fought like a hero of ancient myths, cutting through the ranks of legionnaires until he was surrounded on all sides.
He was wounded in the thigh by a spear, but dropping to one knee and covering himself with his shield, he continued to fight off the advancing Romans. Spartacus's body was never officially found. He vanished into history, becoming an immortal legend right on the field of his last battle. Rome won the military victory in this war, but forever lost the battle for the memory of posterity. The name of Spartacus instantly became a universal symbol of the struggle for freedom across all times and continents. And that is all from me. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.